All right, things are heating up here in Austin, Texas. I'm not only talking about the fact that our weather is still 90 something degrees during the day, I'm also talking about the fact that mortgage rates are hitting all-time highs and we are seeing more news in housing than you can shake a stick at. So without further notice, let's jump into what is happening in the Austin, Texas market, as well as the global market and what is happening with mortgage rates and everything across the board. Mark Koretsky, welcome.
Thank you for having me as always. Jennifer, it's like as much as things change, everything stays the same. It's crazy.
I feel like I'm a parrot.
we both do. And I feel like every professional that actually is a professional feels the same exact way. I heard a couple of weeks ago the difference between a leader and just somebody that is a professional is having the ability to say the same exact thing every single time without finding different ways to say new things. It's finding new ways to say the same thing and not going crazy at the same time. So I feel like you and I and a lot of people are feeling the same way.
Well, it's funny that you say that. There was a comment on the YouTube channel that I just broke down economics and that I deserved a Pulitzer based on my ability, to talk about economics with you. And I was just so thrilled to be nominated because I've never been nominated for a Pulitzer. And the reality is, obviously, that what we are talking about in the market does change from week to week in the actual numbers. However, because we are in a cyclical business, life is cyclical, the real estate industry is cyclical, lending is a part of that we are in some ways repeating ourselves. It's just question is where are we in that cycle of where we are. And I mean, a few months ago, we were singing a very different story than we are today. So with that in mind, let me share with you that we are really hovering at the same point in Austin that we have in the last couple of weeks. We're just shy of 10,000 houses that are available for sale. We're at 9,926 as of this morning when we're shooting this. And I was running some numbers, and we are sticking around that same point where we're about 44% of all of our homes that are for sale fall within the 500 to just under $1 million price point.
Same story. That's a good place to be, right? I mean, when it comes to affordability and unaffordability, like that's as close as you can get to that line, right? So, absolutely. I mean, I know you're obviously hyper local in Austin. I'm hyper local up here in the DFW, but we look all across the country, and I mean, there's a lot of states that have far more inventory and far bigger increases in that available inventory. Do you know what's the population size of Travis County?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's look up Google and find out right now, see what the latest population index is.
It's still going to be less than, like, it's probably like 5 buyers for every inventory, right? Like, it's still, as much as like things go up and things go down, like the amount of people that we have is only increasing.
Yeah, and in my head, so this feels exactly right. So we were in 2020, we were at 1.251 million in Travis County. Then you've got Harris County, which is bigger. That puts us at 4.58. Bexar is at 1.97, and Tarrant County 2.077 million. Again, looking back at 2020, so the new numbers will come out shortly.
It's a lot of people, Jennifer. That's a lot of people, and 10,000 homes. That's not going to cover it.
No, it'll never cover it. It never will, and it never has. However, what we're seeing now still is a constant migration here to Austin, and that has not slowed down because we haven't really seen a ton of mandated back to work. And people are consistently asking themselves, where do I want to live? Where's going to be a great lifestyle? Listen, Austin, Texas is not going to guarantee you snow. So if you're going to want snow, this is not the place to be. You may want to be in some of the markets that are actually getting hard hit right now with price decreases like Boise, Idaho, parts of Colorado, different areas, California, where they're really getting hammered on their housing prices. We are not, and we can't guarantee you snow. Sorry.
Well, and I mean, those states were far less populated, right, to begin
Yeah.
with. Disregard California, of course. But it's also like these net migration numbers are still very much in favor of Texas as opposed
Mhm.
to the Colorados and the Idahos and the Iowas, right? And so the more people come in, the more demand there is. And what I'm seeing more than anything is a reduction in building, in new permits issued, in new permit actual applications. And so, where is this inventory going to come from? We don't know. And right now, the builder sentiment with mortgage rates being where they are, with buyer demand coming down over these last couple of years, it's just continuing to show me the proof that we're never going to reach this seller's or this buyer's market that everybody's claiming that we're in already.
Well, not in Austin, and what we are seeing, and what you and I have talked about in the past, is the fact that we're seeing more builders building rental spaces, more apartments coming online. Heck, there's this massive development up at the Domain, which, if you're familiar with Austin, it's really giving downtown a run for its money in terms of becoming a destination. And it's mixed use. It's mostly, and what it's known for, obviously, is its retail space. However,
Mhm.
there is multifamily in there. There are office towers there, that are sitting on top of the all of the fun and restaurants that are going on there. And now they're really looking at the development of this sort of phase two. Realistically, it's a 15 phase project, is what they're calling it. But they're about to develop I think it's 6 million square or no, six 66 acres and 7 million square feet of space is about to be developed over the next little while, which again will be mixed multi-use. And the residential that they're building right now is calling for hundreds of apartments to be built.
I
So
mean, we
they're
don't
building.
have, at the end of the day, whether it's rental, whether it's like houses for sale, we're talking about shelter, right? And
Mhm.
we have the millennial generation, the generation that's coming up right behind me and behind us. We don't have enough shelter for us. And so we're seeing prices going up for home values. We're seeing prices going up for rental amounts. And as much mayhem as the Fed is throwing at us, that there's only so much they can do, right?
Yeah.
Besides what I don't see anybody really talking about is how do we actually incentivize more building? How do we actually decrease the barriers to actually build? How do we actually bring more alternative units onto the market and actually legitimize them? There's really very little conversation happening around that. More conversations happening, which is really scary to me, about rent control and rent stabilization, as they try to call it. But that we're talking about that, which, if you look at New York and what rent control did for that state, all of that is just going to be completely counterintuitive and a lot of unintended consequences coming as a result of it. And all that means is cost of living, cost of shelter going up.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what you were talking about. And for anybody who is considering moving to Austin or is already living in Austin, and when you look at whether you are owning or whether you are renting, if you're looking at putting your pesos away right now, and if ever there was a time to be aware of your financial house, now is the time. And as you're looking at that ownership, what can you control from your, money going in and out, and how do you build your financial house going forward so that you are in an opportunity that if the market does come down, that you are in a position to buy later on.
I think the only thing that we can do is just accept personal responsibility for it, right? And I
Mhm.
think it starts there. And once you really internalize the fact that whatever it is that you want to do, it's up to you to actually make that happen. That's where you
Mhm.
can actually take a serious look at what is the situation today, where are we, what are the problems, what solutions can we implement? And then now you can actually figure out a roadmap for where you want to go. But I think it all starts with just accepting that at the end of the day, we all need shelter, and it's on us to be able to provide it, right?
Absolutely. We all need shelter. And so, what are those considerations? Are you considering multi-generational? Do you need to downsize and allow for yourself to live in a smaller footprint? Is it a consideration multi-generationally where you have a couple of generations living under a single roof? So you buy a house that is big enough and maybe there's an elevator in it. We've got a number of those in Austin that just really allows for, mom and dad and a couple kids plus, their parents. So grandma and grandpa can live upstairs because they now have accessibility, which is huge. I'm seeing more and more builders, and I always encourage my clients for this, if they are building, to have a seamless shower entry. And the idea with that is there is no lip that then takes you into, which means you can walk in and you can walk out safely. It also creates a space where if you put a wider door, then you ultimately have access from a wheelchair perspective, and all of these things that we need to consider going forward, because let's hit the thing that we're talking about with rates right now. That is the elephant in the room, is we don't know where rates are going to go. I mean, we can say it's cyclical and in 10 years we're going to be in really great shape, but in the meantime, we all have to afford our homes. So what are you seeing right now, Mark, with who you're talking with? You're talking with a client of ours even this week. Like, what are you seeing right now, and what are you recommending for people to do who are considering buying right now?
The biggest thing is, like you just said and alluded to, it's figuring out what that affordability is for them. And that's a personal number. And
Yeah.
I have too many people coming to me trying to figure out what is the maximum that they can get, which is the complete wrong way to go about buying a house and getting a rental. It's, what do we actually afford? And if we can lock in monthly affordability from there, how do we do it in the least cost effective way, or the most cost effective way? And then how do we do it with the least out of pocket to get into that house? And so that's really the way that I'm approaching it. That's the way that I've considered it. That I think that's the best way for buyers to be able to actually get into a house and then not put in all of their money into the house. Because, here in Texas, we have very unique home equity laws relative to every other state. And so in Texas, we can only pull out 80% of the home's value. That's a huge reason why I'm very bullish on the Texas market. It's a huge reason why in the last Great Recession, Texas outperformed every other state. And it's because we don't allow homeowners to actually over leverage themselves. And so even if we have price cuts happening, there's no way that really a majority of people are going to find themselves underwater. And so I think that's the key, is just making sure that you get that monthly affordability, because if you have that, then everything else is to follow.
Yeah, and stress test it, right? So in the event that,
I'm
pardon?
glad you brought that up, because I talk about that with my buyers every single day. It doesn't matter if somebody's renting, it doesn't matter if somebody's downsizing or upsizing. That monthly affordability and that monthly payment is ultimately what they're signing up for. After all the glitz and glamour is done, we've crossed the finish line, we've closed on the house, we've gotten ourselves into this debt. Do we afford this payment? My biggest recommendation for everybody is live that life before you're forced to live that life. And so, for example, if somebody has gotten comfortable paying, let's say $2,000 a month, and they're considering upsizing, and I've seen some people go significantly higher than what they're currently paying. And so let's say somebody is saying, they look at their budget and they think, well, we can afford 4,000, 4,500, like that's our tippy top. Live that life before you're forced to live that life, right? And so we're about to come into October. October payments are about to be due. My biggest recommendation is, if those are the numbers in your example, take that difference, or whatever that difference is in your particular case, and put that money into your savings account. At the end of the month, your bank account now feels what it's going to feel like when you have that new higher payment. If you don't afford it, you're going to be the first one to know about it. And it's a lot better to know about it before you're forced to live that life.
Yes, I'd rather stress test it on paper than stress test it in real life. I think there are enough things right now that are going on that are, quote unquote, allowing for stress in people's lives. And it's a time where we don't want to be in fear. We want to be in uh, a space where our financial house, like I said earlier, is in order. And there are things that we can do to consider that. And so, at a time where people a year ago might have been refinancing with you, now where your real strength comes in is to work with them to stress test and allocate funds on paper first so that they can actually have enough money to live versus becoming house poor, which I think a lot of people are going to find, especially if they're looking right now at renewing their mortgages.
Right. That's absolutely right. And I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it, but
Mhm.
ultimately, like what you see in the bank account, that's the only thing that matters. And I can
Yeah.
tell you from like a psychological standpoint, actually, before we talk about that, from a like an economic standpoint, our
Mhm.
consumer debt levels are at their highest. Our home equity levels are at their highest.
Mhm.
And so what we're seeing is really a reduction in monthly cash flow and the opportunity for somebody to restructure their debts by using and leveraging that home equity. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I mean, there's so many different ways to go about it. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what matters to you, right? And that's why I think finding the professionals that actually care about you and what's in your long-term best interest, that's ultimately what somebody is shopping for when it comes to a real estate agent or a mortgage advisor, a financial planner, any whatever profession, pick it. If you can find a good person that's out there working for you and in your long-term best interest, that's how anybody's going to succeed in this market or any other.
Absolutely. And with that said, bear in mind buyers and sellers, and this is something that we haven't talked about in a long time, Mark, is people now thinking that maybe they can save some money by going directly to, say, a for sale by owner. And I would say, yes, I'm a professional, and this is how I put bread on the table. But more importantly, you as a buyer going direct looking to save money, think about this. If anybody's going to save money going forward with the sale of a home, don't you think the seller is going to look to save money in their pocket before they give the buyer a break?
Yeah, it
Captain
would be
Obvious.
counterintuitive if they weren't, right?
Yeah,
Like we all have our own best interest, and that's why we have professionals that we need to rely on to be able to actually communicate, negotiate, and actually be able to create a win-win for everybody.
absolutely. I mean, me saving $100,000 for a client on a condo or another property, the difference in my professional fee in saving them $100,000 is like not
Oh,
enough to pay my grocery bill. So it's my job to interpret the data and ensure that my clients understand the value of today's market when they are buying, and they understand the value of today's market when they are selling, so they're not chasing the market down and having their house on the market like some of these iBuyers we've talked about in the past, where these houses just sit and sit and sit, and they can afford it because they've got billions, but we, as the average person, need to sell our home, and we do not want to be chasing the market down based on what the values are currently.
I think ultimately all of us don't know what we don't know, right?
For
Especially on the
sure.
consumer level.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, really it's you brought up the iBuyer, and I have to tell this story because it's too funny. I literally across the street from me, my neighborhood houses they get listed properly, they get staged properly, they're gone, right? My across the street neighbor sold to Open Door. The house has now been on the market for over 100 days. Nothing was done to it, like in terms of improvements, repairs, nothing. It took 95 days for them to actually put a for sale sign up in the front yard.
They're incinerating money. These iBuyer companies are incinerating money, and all I can
But here's the
say
thing
is
is
when
what they're also doing is they're keeping the actual inventory down by doing that, right? Like by not staging the property, by not getting it market
Mhm,
ready, it's like they never listed. And so
mhm,
for all of the buyers that are out there looking, and let's be honest, nobody buys and sells real estate because they want to, right? It's because they need to for one reason or another. If you're not presenting a property properly, you can basically take that out of the available inventory. It's like it's not even there.
yeah, buyers are too smart right now. There's way too much information, out there readily available, to them, and ultimately the interpretation of what the value is and how that is then negotiated is really what you're paying your agent to do, and now more than ever in this market that is shifting in so many directions based on the fact that the Fed is doing what it's doing to stem inflation and the impact that that is having then on the mortgage, what that is translating to in the world of mortgages and therefore housing prices. This is when your realtor is super important when you're a buyer and when you're a seller. Again, it's what is the value today based on affordability with rates hitting, 7% or whatever that number may be. When 6 months ago it was at 3%. So now what's your buyer pool look like realistically? And can you really anticipate that somebody's going to move here um, from California like Santa Claus with a sack of money on their back? Like it that's not a strategy.
It's not a strategy. And at the end of the day, I think we put so much emphasis on home values and are they going up or are they going down? We don't actually say the honesty, which is it's all theoretical, right? Like your home equity, until you actually sell it, you actually pull it out, it's all theoretical. And so
Mhm.
whether it's going up every month at 1% or 5% or going down at 1 or 5%, it's all theoretical. It's not until you actually go out and sell or buy that any of it is realized. And so
Abs
there's too much just hypothesizing and too much like clickbait. Let me get the best headline out there. And there's very little advising that's happening.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's why I enjoy working with you because you are an advisor, and I take and whether I'm whether I send you a first-time home buyer or a very experienced, home buyer who's flush with cash and able to buy, uh, to really navigate these waters, Mark, I really appreciate the time that you always take
Of
with
course.
interpretation. And I look forward to seeing how these next couple of months roll out. With that said, we're going to keep it light and tight today. What, if anything, would you like buyers to know at this stage of the game while they are house hunting?
I think I mean, keep an eye on the market. There's like the population and like the buyer pool is split 50-50. It's like 50% feel like that it's doom and gloom and they're backing out. And the other 50% are looking at that 50% and going, oh, now's my chance. Now's my opportunity.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, you don't make money when you sell, you make it when you buy. And
Yep.
so after 24 months of basically like the highest, the most competitive situation possible where it was next to impossible to actually win an offer and then actually get to closing. Now these buyers are able to actually lock in a good price in the long term. Yes, their rates and their affordability is a little bit worse than it has been in years, but at the end of the day, we all need a house, right? And so if we're able to actually take advantage of the challenges and the adversity that's coming our way, if you're able to buy a good home, not a money pit, you're able to get yourself that monthly affordability. That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, and that gets into looking at all again, going back to that holistic consideration when I sit down with my clients, I look at what where does this house fit in the puzzle of your generational wealth? Where does this house or a condo or whatever it is fit into today versus say what you want to do in 5 years from now? Or is it something that you buy it today and the whole goal is to break even with it while it's accruing, maybe not even cash flow, and then you sell and it pays for the kids going to college. Like every piece of real estate has a different story because it has a different person who has carved out what it is that they are trying to achieve. And so I always allow people to make their decisions based on the most amount of knowledge available to us today. And then what are those considerations for future self? And then bring it back down before making any type of, hurry up and then, regret it later.
Irrational decisions, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to buy a house under duress and make stupid choices. Like, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But if you're actually needing to do something,
Yeah.
approach it, get the professionals. That's why I love working with financial planners, because they help actually quarterback this whole thing. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, very few consumers I'm seeing actually have a financial planner on their side. And so for me, it's like I'm acting as that financial quarterback and actually looking at it through that lens, and then
Mhm.
trying to connect them with somebody that I know, like, and trust, so that it's not just me that's working towards their long-term best interest. It's a team effort, because that's what it takes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you said that. I'm all for this. This buying and selling of a home is a team opportunity, with the quarterback being the buyer or the seller always. And so that is a big part of what we do, is we bring that to the table for them so that they can then make the best decision possible in light of what we know based on today's market, and keep going. Really just keep going.
I mean, it's we obviously, real estate is our life, right?
Yep.
For our clients, it's their real estate, it's their home, it's their
Mhm.
investment. It's not their life, right? And so we've got to actually diagnose that and empathize with that, and then help give the best advice to then help them in their long term, whatever those goals are. For me, like, I hope to never have a free and clear house, right? Because I know and understand debt leverage and how that all works. For
Mhm.
others, it's they want a paid off home. I get that. Like, I see the attractiveness in that, and it's my job to help my clients get there, right? It's just we've got to be able to diagnose where we're at, understand where the goals are, and where the vision is, and then how do we create a roadmap and a game plan that we can actually help our client go out and execute on.
I love it. And with that said, thank you for being here today. It's been great. I always love chopping it up with you every single week. Next week, let's talk about some strategies, because we didn't talk about that this week, but it's kind of nice to have a break and not be a broken record every single week. But next week, let's talk about some affordability strategies. I'll bring forward to the table what's going on, what I'm seeing now with builders right now, because they're coming to the table in a very different way. And then we'll see where we're at, because that'll be a whole news story for consideration given everything that's going on. So thank you, Mark, for being here today.
You are very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And y'all, if you're listening to this, go call Jennifer. She's going to help you.
I appreciate it. The thing is, when you call me, I'm going to turn around and have you call Mark. So it works out beautifully, because we cannot buy you a house based on a hypothesis that you have good credit and you can afford it. We really do. I mean it with my whole heart. The attention we place right now on your financial currency is the difference between leading a good life, a crappy life, or a great life. Just knowing that you have some type of financial security built into the plan, and it it makes all the difference in the world, because I do not want you calling me in a year saying, Jennifer, we can't afford it. I want us to look at stress testing things with Mark. I want us to take matters into our hands for today, and then look at how we can plan for your future. So the holistic approach is the only way to go. So feel free to call me. I would love, by the way, to hear any comments that you have in the comments section below. And Mark and I will be here weekly to answer any of your questions and make sure we bring you all the latest and greatest of what's happening in the news with Austin as a housing market, as well as the economy and how that is affecting our world here in Austin, Texas. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will catch you next time.